Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, glad you could join me. If you've been here before, well, welcome back. Today we're going to be continuing our quest to redesign and revamp this villain from Ghostbusters, the Real Ghostbusters cartoon. This villain is from the episode Slimer Come Home, and his name is Gash. We learned that in the last stream. And so he's got a name. We can put a name to this face now, regardless of how gruesome this face is. He's this very strange pig-like demon with this big giant belly and this weird snake mouth going on, and he eats tiny ghosts. And that's basically what we got going on here. So a very interesting character indeed. This is actually the first stream with my new PC. I ended up building a new rig and updating some things. And I think I've got everything sorted out for the stream. I hope everything's looking and sounding all right. So we may encounter a couple little hiccups here and there, but we'll work through it. So again, thanks for joining me. And if you're working on something creative, good luck and save often. So we've done the rough line art here, and with this, I'm going to just do a rendered painting, and so I don't want to really do a super clean line pass next. I'd rather just jump into doing some shadow work. I really like to use ambient soft shadows to sculpt all the forms. I like painting as if I am sculpting, and I just find that process to be really enjoyable. So I think we're going to go from this right into that phase, and then we'll just see where it goes from there. All right, so let's jump in. We'll do a little bit of layer work first to set ourselves up for this process. Okay, let's see. So here's our line, and then this was our underdrawing. So we can kill the underdrawing. And, hey, Zane, how's it going? And we can take the line art, and we're going to pull the slider way down. So that way we just see hint of our lines, and I also want to go ahead and colorize these, and that's just so that we get better visibility on the shadow work that we're going to do. I don't want the lines that are there to influence how I'm seeing the values as they progress. So I usually like to go with something on the warmer side, orange or red. You know, people's eyes generally are more receptive to warmer tones, and so we can go with something that's very light, but if it's a warmer tone, it'll still show up pretty well. At least works for my eyes. You might find a color that works best for you that's a little different. And with the background, I'm going to go just a little bit lighter with it. And that's with the same goal of giving us really good visibility on our values. Okay. Now you may not see that very clearly on your end, but it's going to be adjusted so that I can see it to just the right degree on my screen. Everything's sounding all right. Okay, good. Well, I guess we got the audio stuff working okay on the new machine. You know, and the other thing we might do too is we might adjust our resolution. So when we start getting into these smaller details here, I want to make sure we have sufficient res to work with. And with that, let's just take a look and see what our pixels are. Actually, that might be okay. I think we might be all right. We can always upgrade later if we need to. Now this background has got a lot of noise to it, and I'm not a fan of all that noise. I think it's okay to have a little bit, just to make it feel a little bit less digital, but I don't want it to be too distracting. And we're going to start with the face, and I usually start with the face. It's a really fun, challenging part of a design, a character design, and what I find is that if you can, well, the face typically requires the most attention. If you can render the face really well, it elevates the entire image. So it's worth putting extra time and effort into that. But also, when the face comes together, it's sort of motivating, and it gives life to the image, and it sort of gives you the momentum to render the remaining part of the image. that's some of the like psychology behind it that works for me. So let's see what we can do with this face. And I may reduce this down a little bit more. Okay, let's try that. And because our line work is loose, it prevents me from feeling locked into the line work too specifically. And I want that in this step where as we sculpt forms, as we see them with value, we can change our mind a little bit about the design. We can change all kinds of things in this next pass versus if you were to go with a really tight set of line work and you might fill in all of your flat colors and then establish shadows on that. That's a great process. I do that as well. But you would definitely want your line art to be super clean, and you would want to be really confident in your design at the line stage. And I don't know, some images that works really well, and other times I like having a little more freedom during the shadow the shadow phase. And I've also, if you remember last time, we had some thumbnails and doodles off to the left. I've cut those out of this version, and that's so I can easily flip this thing horizontally and it doesn't pivot all over the screen. Because as we work on this, I definitely am going to want to check how the symmetry is looking pretty often. So he's going to have a pretty gnarly mouth setup here. I don't want to get into that too soon. I think we'll just kind of go with these big forms first. And that's a good strategy in general for sculpting forms, is just think about what's the big shape. Head is typically a sphere, so shade it like a ball and then carve into the ball. It can be fun also to work in this method without any drawing underneath at all. If you're painting something from reference, just doing a study, that's a lot easier, right? Because then you're not doing any invention. I mean, there's a little bit of mark making invention, but you know, we're not designing something new, and you don't really necessarily need an underdrawing in there to make it work. And in fact, I've worked with some people in the industry who are just really, really skilled, and they can work in tone like this without any drawing at all, even when they're inventing everything. So it's I've done that too. It's cool. It's a fun process. It definitely gives you a sort of a spontaneity and a freedom. But anything that's a little bit more elaborate, where we've got a full body and we've got, you know, lots of different clothing elements. In this case, he's holding on to these tiny monsters. There's just a lot going on, and I feel safer having some kind of line work underneath to riff off of. Something kind of cool, sort of unrelated to art, more to my streaming setup, is after installing all the new versions of everything on my computer, the multi-chat in OBS is working now. Like I can see actually Twitch chatters and YouTube chatters in the same window, which is something that wasn't working before. I guess they fixed that in the latest version, so that's kind of cool to see. All right, what's going on with this guy's crazy mug? Guess we can probably block in some teeth. Now, when you're doing this too, you know, we're working tonally, but if there's some area that you're feeling like is giving you trouble, or you're not sure about the design, and you feel more comfortable maybe drawing things versus shading things, then just make your brush smaller and use it like it's a pencil. You know, it doesn't have to be a tonal process. You can use the same brush, and when you make it small, it behaves just like a pencil, right? And you can switch to basically like flip the switch in your brain to line mode, and just draw it out first. There's no rules here. Just you know, adapt to the challenge you're facing. You know, here it's like, well, the teeth are like very small and finicky, and the placement is really precarious. So I'm thinking more like I'm drawing than shading first to establish the position and everything, and then we can kind of bring our brush back up in size and flip the switch back to tone mode in our brain. And so what your goal will be is to make that switch effortless, right? Like that you can go in between the two modes at the, you know, at a moment's notice without any effort. And that will make the process a lot more fun too. You'll feel like you can rise to any challenge. But it takes practice, obviously. So if you're trying it and you're feeling like it's your brain is on fire, that's good. First of all, that means you're learning new things. But second of all, just take a break. Let some of that knowledge sink in, seep its way into your brain, and then when you come back to it, you might be surprised at how you can better utilize that new information. I kind of think about it like, you know, if you've ever done any sort of like, you know, muscle building routine, you know, like, even not like bodybuilder level, like even just something simple, like I want to make my arms stronger or whatever, right? You know, you got to kind of like break the muscle down first and then let it heal and build itself back up. And then you're like, wow, I'm stronger now. Like it wasn't instantaneous, but like I let it rest and build back up, and now I noticed the gain. Um, your brain is kind of like that, right? Like you kind of have to like really feed it some new information, work it out for a bit, and then kind of let it rest, and then come back to it, and then you'll feel like you really leveled up. Okay, so we're going to have like a gum line here. And then we're going to have the lip right here. You know, I also do 3D work, and I love ZBrush. Some of you may be 3D artists out there, and you may also like ZBrush. And one of the things I like about this approach is that it feels as though I'm in ZBrush. Feels like I'm working with clay, which is cool. Now I feel like maybe, see, this is where the sculpting approach is nice, right? Because we can sort of maybe get the chin to sort of disappear. Like maybe we just see the end of his chin here, and then maybe it kind of like gets absorbed into this big blobby fatty neck area. And here again is where I'm appreciating that I can deviate from the original lines. If I feel like with the tone I'm wanting something different, then we just go for it. I mean, we don't want to, you know, do something completely out of the ordinary, like now he's got a third head over here, and over here he's got 3 heads or something like that. You know, that's maybe a little bit too far, but all kinds of like minor tweaks to the forms are very, very possible. So then we can flip it and we can sculpt looking the opposite way. The other thing that can be nice is use the lasso tool. So this is something that I see students struggling with when we talk about painting with ambient shadows or sculpting with ambient shadows, is that their shadow work starts to feel like lines. It starts to feel like they're just outlining forms. And we have to remember that ambient shadows have varying fall off. If surfaces are close and tight, then we have a very thin fall off to the ambient shadow. If surfaces are very broad and there's like a wide delta, then we're going to get a really large fall off of shadow. So here we've got the neck against this collar, and so I'm using a lasso to sort of isolate that edge out here, and then I can, you know, fade in some very nice soft shadow spilling away from that. And that variable gradation is what makes your shadows look convincing. It's what gives them a sense of realism and prevents them from feeling like an outline. The other thing that you want to be cautious of with this approach is that we're sort of working from the darkest parts outward. And you know, that's an important part to define, is that area from the darkest part. However, there's halftones that are important all throughout. Like if we sort of imagine, you know, this shape here is like a kind of like a bean shape, right? Um, we're defining values mostly in this sort of region because we're thinking about how it's sort of getting tucked against this cloth here, and so we're bringing in shadow up from this edge. But there's important values to express all throughout this shape, and the values living all throughout this shape here are halftones. And so what we want to do is we want to acknowledge the fact that with this method we're likely not expressing enough nuance to halftones in this upper range here, because we are working from the cracks outward. To address this, we could just try to paint our shadows in more, but I like to instead, in another pass later, we're going to basically introduce diffused highlights, and that will define the upper range of our halftones. It just sort of completes the forms. And you'll see certain styles and certain artists really focus on certain value ranges. There's some artists that are just very focused on these dark shadow areas, and some artists and styles focus a lot on the midtones. Things you'll see from studios like Blizzard, like the Warcraft universe, League of Legends, Hearthstone, things like that. There's a lot of care in the midtones. There's these like almost like buttery midtones, right? Everything feels very the forms all feel very loud because there's this really kind of even fall off, and you see the highs, the mids, and the lows in a very sort of even way. The highs or the lows are never overpowering the mids. So it's just, there's a lot of visibility in the way that they treat that stuff, and it's very pleasing. It's like eye candy, right? You know, versus well, we can get into that if you guys are interested in hearing more about some of that stuff. I'd be happy to talk more about that. But you guys let me know what interests you, and I'm happy to yeah, expand a bit on some of these ideas. So like here, you know, I'm kind of just drawing a line, and I think that's fine because it's a thin form, and I just want to be able to see it. Now I have to think about what's happening here, because you know, there's some cloth, I guess, that is maybe dipping in like this here. These are things where sculpting the form of tone can help us better realize all of these transitions. And if you're not sure where to start with sculpting these shapes, again, think about the big shapes first, and then think about just a very simple sort of like a halo. Don't go too dark with that though, because ambient shadows, you know, we're going to have some haloing due to off-axis light, but we don't want it to be a dark outline on everything, right? Because that would look very artificial and strange. But it's a good place to start, though, if you're just not sure. And this process here is, well, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a slow process, but it's a methodical process that benefits from a lot of care and thought, as does, I suppose, every step. But this one I think can feel like it's time consuming compared to some of the other steps. Like, I think that the step of adding like reflective highlights is you get a lot of quick feedback, quick joy out of very little work in that phase, versus this one where it's just, you got to go in and you got to really be good about defining stuff, and that's time consuming. So here we're just kind of defining these pipe folds. And I think the other thing that sometimes artists struggle with is understanding the range of values that they want to use. And if you're having some trouble with that, find a spot where you feel like there's a lot of intersecting forms and just push the darkness a little harder in that area. And by having that on the canvas, your eyes will sort of calibrate to the value range that you're going to be working with. So here, for example, if I wanted to start to feel what's the range that I want to be using, I can go in and let's just define a little bit more shadow coming out of this mouth here. I'm going to go a little heavier with it. Right. And so now that that's there on the canvas, my eyes adapt, right? Your eyes start to see, oh, okay, that's where we're headed. Okay, that needs to be popped into a few other places or whatever. So if you're struggling with that, try defining the extents of your value range in a couple obvious areas, and it will likely help you springboard to decisions elsewhere. And that's always going to be the case with every piece, right? Is that there's areas where you're more confident and areas where you're less confident. And just start with the places that are a little bit more obvious to you. And having those pieces of the puzzle in place may help you see how to tackle some of those trickier spots. You just may need to have some information on the canvas to work off of. I do that every time I paint. I'm doing it right now, right? I'm creeping in on areas where I'm like a little bit less certain. Switch this back to the other side, the side that we're used to seeing. So something else we could mention here is the flipping thing, and how flipping often is good, but there is definitely flipping too often. And then the question might be, well, then how do you know if you're flipping enough or it's flipping too much? And the answer lies in understanding why flipping works. So flipping works because you're seeing something new from a different vantage point. And that newness, that freshness is going to allow you to see issues, right? But if you flip too often, what happens is that alternate view becomes just as familiar to you. And so when you flipped too often, when the second view feels like it's not revealing anything, right? If it doesn't feel fresh to you, then you basically burned it up. If you do that, don't worry. Like, just step away from the painting for a while. Like, give it an hour, find something else to do, or switch to another piece of art. And you can gain that back. You can gain that insight back. But I'll tend to work for a little bit in one view, give it some time, then flip back. You'll find a good rhythm. sometimes when I'm doing this pass, some of my shadow work is not genuine ambient occlusion. I'm bringing in a little bit of just uh, directional form shadow, just for the sake of understanding and defining the forms for myself. And I'm okay with that, because I know that these forms need to read, and I don't want to rely on the fact that there is going to be some additional light brought in later. Like one of the things that I really enjoy about this is knowing that we can just have an ambient render, an ambient style render, and that it reads fine. There's a lot of artists that do great work without using directional lights. I was just talking to some students at the school I work at yesterday about some artists that they basically just have the entire render be like an ambient style render, as if the whole front of the character is in shadow, basically. In shadow from the directional light that is then introduced as a very strong rim light from the back. And that can be a really compelling look because you have the contrast of the soft shadows in the front with the hard edge directional shadows from the side. And it's something that I may actually do in this piece because I do like rim lighting. And I recognize it's a cool look. So it's like a winning formula. So I think that might be where we go with it. But because of the way we're approaching this, I'm not locked into that choice, right? Like ambient shadows are going to exist in basically every situation that you're going to be working with. Unless you're talking about some weird space thing, right? Some weird, or you're working in some weird alternate dimension, or like there's definitely like you could find edge cases where it's not going to be there in the way that you would think, but everything that we would typically see is going to have some amount of ambient light and therefore ambient shadow. Let's try and get a little bit of a heavier shadow established for this part here. I'm just going to pop that in and calibrate our vision to that. Okay, so his neck just kind of comes down here like this, and then his chest is here, so he's got these chains, and those are important, but I kind of don't want them to interfere with how I'm defining this anatomy here first, so we'll just paint that in later. And in fact, maybe we should just go for this stomach right now. And I'm not certain if I want to like give him detail in his eyes or not. Like I'm thinking it might be cool to just have the glowing eyes. It feels very ghost-like to do something like that, and so I think that might be a good choice. In the drawing, I think we had just little like slivers just to kind of indicate a bit of directionality to his gaze, but I'm not certain if we want to bring in detail in the eyes or not. One thing, though, that is, I think, helpful is even if you plan on having a character who has no irises or pupils, if it's just going to be like a blank, a glowing eye, still just in your drawing or in your development sketch, just put a dot in for the direction of the eyes, because it'll help you, I think, just read the personality, make some judgments about angle and the symmetry of the eyes and stuff. Like I think it's a little harder to judge things when you've got the blank eyeballs there. And of course, you can just erase that detail later. So if you guys remember, I was talking last time about how I wanted to do this spectral hat that floats, and one question that might come up is, well, if this is spectral, then isn't it like glowing? And isn't it going to be like, why are we painting these shadows if it's going to be glowing? And the reason is because I like to work one light at a time. And I don't want this hat to be without volume. Like I want it to still have volume. And so I want it to still read as a cylinder. And so I'm still going to shade it like a cylinder based on sort of ambient lighting going on in the scene. And then we can always come in and we can work additively to make it feel like it's glowing. I try to minimize how much sort of like lighting calculation math I have to do in my head, right? Like I'm going to leverage the digital tool to help me separate that and make it easier. So I just do one light at a time. And that's kind of how I treat color as well. Just go with a basic color first, think about the local color, and then we can think about what happens to that color as lighting and the environment does its thing. Okay, let's see. I think we can probably... Yeah, let's do the mouth. I think that might be a good thing to do next. So, okay, he's got this sort of like snake-like thing. It's like a kind of like a boa mixed with a rattlesnake, I guess. Super gross, nasty design. And we can certainly add some additional details that weren't in the drawing. And that'll be fun. So one thing you definitely are going to notice is that I tend to zoom in and out a lot as I'm working, and that's just another way to sort of, check how things are reading. You can always look off to the navigator as well, right? See the image smaller off to the side, or look at your streaming window if things are smaller there. Like those are all awesome options as well, but it's just so nice to just kind of like pull in and out and just kind of check yourself. It might even be it might even be like a weird habit I have at this point because I'm just so, it's like a weird muscle memory to zoom in and out on something. So I probably do it more than I need to, but if you're watching and you're wondering about that, that's basically the reason. And you'll also see that I sort of sneak up to these shapes. I don't go in and I don't bash something really, really strong right away. I sort of feel it out first. Now, the interesting thing is there's sort of like a rounded gum line here, and then we're going to have serrated teeth along that. So I think I'd rather just sculpt the gum line in first, and then bring the teeth in on top of that. Okay, let's flip. You can kind of see, okay, so like this tooth here feels like that's a little small, so let's... That's one thing I got to fix on my new machine is I have that weird Photoshop move delay issue. I'm sure you guys have encountered this before where you go to move and it's like everything just takes 1 second for it to like start moving. It's with the sliders and everything as well. Apparently it's like a very well-known issue, and you might wonder, well, how did you fix that on your other computer? Well, my other computer was using a much older version of Photoshop where I was able to go in and tell it to use the WinTab tablet pressure drivers instead of the Windows Ink drivers. And that fixes it. But unfortunately, this new version of Photoshop, you can't. Actually, I don't think it's not. It actually isn't a Photoshop thing. It's that I'm on Windows 11, I think. Well, I don't know. I'm on a combination of new things that don't like WinTab. If you try to tell it to use WinTab, it performs very, very poorly. So we're stuck using Windows Ink, and with that comes this challenge of lag with the sliders. So there is supposedly a fix in the Lazy Nizumi Pro software, and I do have that, but I have not installed it on this machine yet. And so I am curious to see if that helps at all. Because other than that slider lag, it's actually been going pretty good. I haven't been having too many issues. You didn't know you could fix that? Yeah, it's. I think most people just sort of live with it, and I wouldn't care as much for the fact that like I had a computer specifically with old stuff on it, so that I didn't have that issue for years. And I don't know that I'm ready to cave in and just accept it. It's really, really annoying. So I'm going to see if I can get this thing behaving just as good as whatever I was on before. I think I was on 2022 on a Windows 10 machine, 2022 Photoshop. And I was able to get that to be basically flawless. So that was nice. That's just why I cling on to a version for a long time. And I'm sure all the pros out there in the audience are going to be able to relate to what I'm saying, right? Like if it works, just stick with it, right? Like you have to get stuff done. And the creative process is not one where you want technical issues getting in your way. Like you need to kind of get in the groove at a moment's notice and be executing on a high level. And if your computer is doing weird stuff, man, it just really kills you. Kills the flow. Yeah, definitely check it out. I use Lazy Nizumi Pro for other reasons to help with like perspective. And so that's really nice. That's kind of like its core feature, but I didn't realize it has this other thing in there. It supposedly helps fix the lag. I'm very, very hopeful that that's going to be a real fix for it. This is another reason that it's like always a little bit tricky to go with new hardware and new software. It's exciting because you're like, wow, that's all these cool features I want to try and play with, and I want my computer to be super fast and all that, but you're also like an early adopter and you end up being kind of like a beta tester for stuff, right? And you can sometimes be experiencing bugs that don't get fixed for months and months. So there's definitely a trade-off there. So I guess the takeaway there is before you upgrade, maybe ask other people who do the stuff that you do whether they're having any weird issues or not, so you kind of know what you're getting into. I didn't do that, and I probably should have. But again, like I got lucky in that I haven't had too many big issues come up. One weird thing though is that I have multiple monitors and they've been actually not during the stream, which is kind of incredible and awesome, but just randomly throughout the day in using my machine for various things, the screen will go black for like a second and then pop back on. Not my main monitor, luckily, my secondary monitor, but That seems to be something related to the NVIDIA graphics drivers. So that I'm hoping will be addressed soon. So the other thing you want to look out for too is even divisions and forms. Like I was looking back at this and I was seeing, you know what, these two shapes are really similar in size, and so you can break it up. You can have a little bit of a lost edge. I just don't want there to be two like even lines that are very consistent. So you know, that's definitely something that you want to look out for, and something that you can tweak in this phase, right? Like this sculpting phase. Now I'm going to try to bring in a little more shadow to this mouth area now that I'm feeling like we got a pretty decent sense of what's going on. Hey, Ryan, is this slime time live? Yep, this is slime time. We're painting up this guy. It's a little hard to see because the line art's turned down, but yeah, this is one of the Real Ghostbusters villains. And then he's going to have this like spirit body kind of flowing down from there. So I think what we might do is, before we get down into the lower body, I might just kind of finish out the hands and the little miniature ghosts, because there's going to be a decent amount of work in there, and if we can get that stuff handled, I feel like we're going to be in a really good spot. And for everybody watching, you know, again, like I mentioned, this stage of the process is it's time consuming, and so just, you know, stay tuned and wait, because if we can do a good job in this phase, then we be able to reap the rewards in the coming phases. The better this phase is defined, the better everything else will look later. Let's talk about getting forms to read. So I have a little, I don't know what you call it, a little strap on this belt here, where, you know, you can imagine like a belt coming through the buckle and then sliding up through this. And so, you know, we want this form to read, and it's like, well, what decisions do we make it regarding value here? Well, you want to think about it like a cube, basically, right? Like if you think about this like a box, and we think about the way we can get a box to read is to assign the sides a unique value. So when I'm shading this, I'm thinking about, okay, well, let's make this top plane the lightest plane, and let's make this front plane a little bit darker. So we'll shade that, and then maybe we'll shade this inner plane a little bit darker than that, right? And so if we just kind of execute those different value changes there, I'm making it a little louder so it's obvious for you guys to see what I'm talking about. Like that makes it clear, right? And so as you're trying to work through forms, just always ask yourself, what is my goal here? My goal is to explain the shape. What is the shape? What are the sides of the shape? What values am I assigning to those sides? And that might sound like really technical, but if you just keep doing it over and over again, then you don't really have to think about it. You just know that's what you're supposed to be doing, and it kind of comes to you naturally. So here, like, this is a cylinder, so you know, I want this face to read. So let's make this lighter, and then let's bring in a little bit of shadow for the side, and I'm going to kind of have it fall off a little bit there. So we're doing a little bit of a fall off trick, but the value change helps us read the planar change. And it's more obvious here, I think, because these are simple shapes. The key to this is remembering to do this when shapes get more complicated. So when you're doing a face, it's like we're thinking about, you know, what's the geometric shape here, right? Like this is a plane and that's a plane. You know, there's planes here. Like it's all just, it looks like simple geometry in my head, like Lego blocks or something. And then I'm making value choices based on that. But it's kind of hard to see that in the way that I'm working, because I'm working like 4 steps ahead of that, right? I'm blending the forms as I'm introducing them. I'm thinking about the fact that it's flesh and it's organic and things are like affected by gravity, right? Like there's all that going on too. So you don't really see that part of what my brain is thinking about. And I think this is why sometimes like watching artists work is kind of hard to learn from sometimes, because they're they're omitting steps, right? Like especially artists that are really advanced, they're omitting tons of steps, and you're only seeing the final line, and it's like, man, that final line looks so good, it looks so perfect. What the heck? And just know there's like 20 things going on in their brain before they get to that mark that they've made. Here I'm thinking about bringing in some like rib cage details. The other thing I'll use is the smudge tool to just kind of like push and pull shadows around a little bit, just to kind of steer them. Again, kind of like a sculpting mentality. I have one that just kind of diffuses the shadow, and then I have one that allows me to kind of like push it around a little bit more, almost like liquefy. Hey, Tom, how's it going? Okay. Now the question is left or right hand? Left or right hand? You know, I was thinking, this is a random thought. I was thinking it might be kind of funny if, like, I don't know, this must be a thing, or maybe I can figure out a way to do it, but it'd be kind of funny to have, like, a magic 8 ball that I could hit a button on the stream, right? Like, we would be like, okay, which hand do I paint? And we'd just, like, hit the 8 ball and it would, like, give us an answer or something, right? Like, but maybe I'd find some kind of visual treatment. Like, it's not an 8 ball, it's like a raven that comes in and just, like, spurts out some answer for us. It can become, like, a character. Hey, it's going good, man. We're cranking on some shadows over here. I've decided on his right hand, left of camera. And hopefully we'll have some fun like sculpting these hands out. I want them to feel kind of like bony, little bony. Not like a witch's hand, not like super thin, but like I want them to feel like I want them to feel like they've got some nice solidness to them. Hope you guys couldn't hear that. That's like my tablet across the room playing a notification sound. Why is it doing that? Quiet, Mr. Tablet. We're trying to do some streaming. All right. So let's see. We got this guy kind of in the way here. I guess we can just go ahead and bring in a little bit of that definition there. I can just start to render this little guy. We're getting like bonus content. It's like, oh, we're like rendering 3 characters in one. Just 2 of them are really tiny. He's got a tiny little arm. He's gonna have like a kind of a pot belly here. This guy's face cracks me up. I tend to paint more serious, darker stuff. And very rarely I'll do something that's got a little bit of like humor, or it's kind of a little more like whimsical. And over the years, I've realized how fun it is to paint something that kind of makes you laugh, and maybe that'll influence some of my work in the future. But it's tough. There's only so much time in the day, and if I have to choose between doing a serious image and a funny image, the serious image usually wins for me. But I must admit that I do have fun. I can do something that's got a little bit of a whimsy to it. So you notice, like, I'm trying to define the sphere. I'm trying to define the fall off of the sphere, so notice my brush gets a lot bigger, right? Like, that brush size should be dynamic. You should be thinking about it like it's serving whatever need you have in the moment. Here we're getting into fiddly details, so now our brain is flipping a little bit to line mode. I gotta bring in that thumb there, so I'm just gonna erase that bit of shadow. Gosh, these details are so tiny. Oh, it'll be worth it. It'll be fun. What is this finger doing? I guess this is sort of like, I guess they're kind of straight, right? What would be happening? The drawing has them straight. That must be what I was originally intending, so maybe we can. Hey, I like to play with this though, because that's the thing about hands, is that they're way more convincing when you can capture some of the nuance. Okay, well, I'll give them a little bit of a bend outward like that. I think that's better than them just being straight, right? Kind of shows the tension of them interacting with the big guy's hand there. Okay, cool. Pull this down a little bit. Okay. Now this hand here, I guess, do we see? I guess I should probably have this thumb. Erase that bit there. Have that thumb showing there. Okay. Yeah, that's all right. Get his ear. Get some. He's got his mouth open, and I think we'll give him a little bit of a double chin here as well. This is like the theme of this image is like epic double chins, right? Get his little horn. And get this side here. Now the cool thing about this method as well is that it's very easy for us to double down on our shadow work if we feel like it's too light. One easy way is we could just straight up duplicate our shadow layer. So if you guys take a look at this, boom, duplicate shadows. Now I don't like to do that globally like that. If I do that, I usually duplicate and pull the opacity way down, and I'll do like a little bit of a global boost. But what I will do is I'll control click this layer's thumbnail so that I am basically limited to everything that's already there. And if I do, let's see, control F, yeah, and then I can just smoke in darker shadows that are isolated to the shadows that are already there. It's a very like weird technique, but it allows you to like double down on what's already there basically, but selectively, which is really cool. So yeah, if you're looking at this and you're like, wow, everything is so light and subtle, it's like, yep, that's totally fine. It's definitely better that we have a lot of like subtlety and nuance in this versus everything being like super blown out or a lack of nuance to the transitions and stuff. Like it should be a very careful pass. Okay, let's think about this guy's mouth shape here. One thing that can help if you're trying to work with like an open mouth is just think about it like a bear trap. You know, you've basically got two shapes, or like, you know, like those chattering teeth that you see, the little gag shop chattering teeth, right? Just think about that as a separate piece. You got a piece here and a piece here, and then the lips and the skin just sort of like stretch over it, right? That's the easy way to think about it. And that helps you too when you're dealing with something that's in perspective like this, right? Like this guy's kind of like tilting his head back and he's showing us his open mouth at a very particular angle. This guy's going to have really big teeth. And maybe we'll give him like some kind of crazy goblin-y teeth on the bottom there. I mean, I'm not believing that goblins have dentists they can go to, right? Like they must struggle with their dentistry. I guess he's a ghost. I keep calling him a goblin, but yeah, I guess he's a goblin ghost. Ghosts and goblins? I don't know. Oops, don't brown his teeth out. Although, again, like, if he doesn't have a dentist, then maybe his teeth aren't quite brown. But we're going to deal with that later. This is the shadow pass, not the local values / color pass. Okay, so he's got his may want to flip this at this point because we're getting into some symmetrical stuff in 3/4 that I kind of don't want to mess up. So probably gonna flip soon here, but we'll see how far we can get. Bothers you when creatures and monsters have perfect teeth. Yeah, yeah. I think it's a cool opportunity to like have some fun with the design. And this guy, I think he will have a little tiny little pupil here, kind of like a Monsters Inc. style eyeball. Might seem a little cartoony, but the rendering will make it feel more real. That's the other thing that's interesting is how much the style of the render can change the feel of a drawing. Like a drawing might feel quite whimsical in its shape language, and then you render it with a certain tone, and it's like, wow, I'm getting a totally different vibe now. Should we give him a monster nipple? There we go. And there we go. All right. He's in a pretty decent spot. I think we can maybe bring in some bigger shadows here and there. But you know, I think it's a good sort of initial pass on it. Again, we're gonna kind of like do multiple passes on all these things. I'll be working back and forth, moving throughout the image to get everything dialed in. Oh, I guess we can give him a little belly button too. Why not? Give him an innie. Do we see the other guy's stomach? Oh, not really. I was going to say it'd be funny. We do like an innie here and we do an outie here. That would be their ghost names, Innie and Outie. So there's like a little pocket of shadow we can do here. So let's see. Go lasso mode. And if you do define an area like this where you're like, I'm probably going to revisit this later, you can always just create a little mask for yourself as a layer, a little utility mask. And I know I'm using these fancy terms. It just means you fill the layer with some color and it's its own layer so you can go back and control click it later. Now, I tend to be masochistic and I like to just select things multiple times over and over. So we'll probably see that going on. Don't ask me why I do that. This is one of those do what I say and not what I'm doing situations. That detail may have to just go up a little bit higher because we're working with some foreshortening there, and I feel like that muscle is just too far down. I want to get some shadow underneath this shape here, so that reads. Yeah, it's kind of fun, like doing a full render. I've been working in a more graphic style for a lot of my recent personal work, and it's kind of nice to just get back into something that's really hyper rendered. I've also been doing a little bit of work in ZBrush for stuff I do at the school, and that's been nice as well. But again, it's not the same thing as like painting and rendering in 2D. There's no rendering in ZBrush, right? It's just realizing forms. Give him a little bit of rounding to his fingers. Here's another thing that I see a lot of people struggle with is that they end up making the fingers all the way up to, like, if this is the corner where the fingers start, right? Don't make the cut of the fingers all the way to this corner, right? Like there's skin here. There's skin in these little areas between the fingers, right? And then the separation happens lower down. Just be careful about that. That's a common mistake that I see that makes hands look really, really bad. And then, of course, bringing in some details to the back of the hand. If the hand is thin enough, if we want to give it like that boniness, that can be cool. Maybe there's some like warts, although I'm not going to get into this micro detail in this phase much. Maybe I'll do it here and there, but like I tend to leave that for more of like the overpainting later. Okay, I'm going to give a little more definition to that there. You miss ZBrush? You've been meaning to get back into it? Oh man, yeah, definitely. Don't get too rusty at ZBrush because it's its own skill, right? Like it's its own beast, and if you're away from it for too long, then you can get kind of slow and it's a little bit of an unfortunate lost edge there. Edge of his hand is like, I'll give a little bit of a negative shape there. Maybe we don't. I don't know. I think I'm going to continue to play with that. Also, let's see. I'm going to liquefy this. I'm going to bring this down a little bit. Okay. Yeah, I think that's feeling decent there. Let's go over to this hand here. So this is I think a little bit I want to say this is a little bit trickier because of the angle, right? Like this one, I feel like this angle is just a little bit easier to work with. This one, we've got this guy looking back. Do I want to rotate this? Let's do a rotation. Image rotate 90 degrees clockwise. Let's render this guy's face at this angle. And then we can, I'm okay rendering the rest of it the other direction, but I don't trust myself to do a head well, essentially like upside down. So let's work this way for a bit. Once I got all the basic stuff locked in, then I know that all the symmetry's working and whatnot. You've tried sculpting in Blender and it's not the same. Yeah, I would agree. It's you can tell that it's a 3D program that had sculpting added on, just like you can tell that ZBrush is a sculpting program that had basic modeling added on, although they did a pretty good job with it with ZModeler. But yeah, I mean, I hope that they can continue to evolve the sculpting stuff in Blender, because it's a free option that I think is a really decent alternative to ZBrush. But once you become like a power user of ZBrush, it's really hard to get used to something as simple as Blender. Like, it just feels very crude comparatively. You know, you're in there and you're doing stuff and you're just like, all right, where's my remesh? Where's my dynamesh? Where's my sculptress? Where's my reproject? Like, there's all this stuff that, you know, is just part of the core workflow, and it's not there. At least I don't think it's there. I can't say that I've really explored a whole lot of Blender sculpting, only the very basics, but yeah. Okay, let's do that kind of mouth there. Get a little bit of a gum line, and then he's going to have some crazy teeth. Should we give him a little more of a scowl? Yeah, let's do that. You like Nomad Sculpt? Awesome for sculpting on the go. Okay, I'll have to check that out. I think I've heard of Nomad Sculpt before. Is it so is it not Windows based? Is it like an Android based thing? Android and iOS. Sweet. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I've been wanting to get into ZModeler so bad, but I know that it's mostly like for VR, or it works best in VR, and I'm not a fan of like wearing a headset, so I'm hoping that they sort of like evolve it to work better without the headset. But I want them to uh, you know, retain support for the VR controllers, though, right? Like, I want to still be able to do like spatial interaction with the VR controllers. I just don't want to wear the headset. But I hear that when you don't use the headset, like, the program just doesn't work very well right now. So I'm kind of holding off till they can refine it a little bit more. But it looks really, really cool. I love doing hard surface in sculpting programs, and I don't like it as much when I'm drawing and painting, because there's just so much like precision and stuff going on that I just think 3D just really lends itself to that. You know, like, if you've ever tried to like well, there's some artists out there that are so good at it. Like, I just I don't know that I have a lot of patience for, like, I don't know, like drawing a tank in perspective perfectly with all of the right, you know, geometry and stuff. Like, it's just a little tough for me to stick with that. That's why like people don't hire me to design vehicles, right? Like, it's just not my thing. But if I had to do that, though, honestly, I would switch to like concepting and a sculpting package, and then I probably fly through that stuff because I do appreciate hard surface design. I think about hard surface design a lot. I pay attention to hard surface design, like, the shape of cars and planes and electronic devices and stuff. Like I like the visual language of that stuff, but yeah, there's a technical aspect to that I don't love when I'm working in 2D. If any of you have ever done Scott Robertson's book How to Draw, you'll know what I'm talking about. That guy is a monster at perspective and precision vehicles in perspective, like just awesome stuff. Is that, hold on, I have to think about this shape. Let's see. Okay, yeah, so that needs to be the rib cage. There we go. Okay. I was like, that shape feels weird. So we were just going to render the head from this angle, but it turns out I'm actually going to do a little more. Because why not? That eye is off. I guess I could flip in this angle too, right? Why not? Now things are getting wacky. I guess that doesn't look that bad. The one thing though is that his head is a little bit too wide over here. Let's cut that in just slightly. There we go. So what's nice about digital is that you can make those tweaks very easily. If I was on paper, I would be going a little slower so that I could avoid having to tweak things. Sculpting in VR is so intuitive. You're too lazy to set it up. Yeah, that's the other thing about creative stuff is that sometimes like you really want to react to like an impulse and like a creative impulse, and if it's like this whole process of like, okay, now I got to like go into this room and turn on all this equipment and then put on all this stuff, and then it's like, I don't know, sometimes that alone can sort of kill it. Whereas like with ZBrush, it's so fast to just open it and throw a sphere in the viewport and just start playing with an idea. So I really appreciate that like immediacy. His tiny little hand, even though it's kind of big compared to like, I guess no, I guess his head is just kind of oversized, but yeah, it's a tiny hand in comparison to the whole image. But that's the whole point, right? This is like a giant, big, evil ghost eating small ghosts. This guy's actually kind of remind me of a creature I had to paint for Privateer Press many years ago. These guys are fun to work with. They're all the War Machine and Iron Horde stuff they do, and they have these weird gremlins in their universe. I forget what they're called. I think they're called gremlins anyway. I had to do an image of a bunch of them, like kind of like salvaging a broken down mech, and and one of them is standing off. It's like this, like this fallen over mech, right? And they're like kind of scrounging parts, but one of them is like standing on the top of the mech, facing away from us, and he's like peeing off the back of the mech. That was in the art description. That was a funny thing to have to illustrate, but it's going back to that idea of like funny things being unexpectedly satisfying to work on. I kind of appreciated that. Okay, so his thumb is here, and then are we just doing that? Is that okay? I think that works. Sure. Nope, nope. There we go. Botch the thumb proportions there. Get some basic spherical or cylindrical haloing on this form. So it reads. Okay. Oh, no, I liked it straight. There we go. Okay. Now, it's interesting because I sort of wonder, is this hand just easier, the big hand also easier to do from this angle? I've been kind of liking working from this angle, so maybe we'll just roll with this. All right, let's save our work. Remember to save your stuff. Get his lower lip in there. Does he have like a sweet brow ring or a sweet nose ring? Now he's really goblin-y, right? Give him like a... That's metal, dude. All right. Hand, big hand. Let's see. We go for the thumb. Let's see. I'm going to put on my hand here so I can kind of like model what's going on here. So let's see. Thumb here, grabs around there. And I think we kind of lose the thumb here. And actually, now that I'm kind of modeling this myself, I think this is one of those things where, like, when I originally drew this, I probably should have had reference for that specific angle. Let's see. Like that there. Is that, let's see, I'm going to rotate this again and see if I'm like, I'm worried that like my view of this thing is like skewing my sense of what it's supposed to look like. I guess that's okay, although I feel like this needs to be a little tighter. Yeah, so this is the first segment here. So I think that what I had off before was I just had it curling in a little bit too much. Yeah. Okay, good. I'm glad we took that moment to double check ourselves. And that's the one thing about hands is you have two references on the end of your arm sticks. So try and use them. I mean, most people do. Sorry, no offense to people who don't have a hand or something. There are also apps you can use that can give you reference. Okay. Oh, I'm trying to like keep myself from getting too crazy with this head right now. Like we're gonna get into it. I just there are certain parts of the image that are always going to be my favorite parts, and I have to catch myself to make sure I don't just keep like going back to those areas and just you know tinkering on them endlessly because that definitely happens. That book is hard. Yeah, yeah. The Scott Robertson book is really, really rough. I got through, I think, the first half of it, maybe a little further than that. It was enough for me to say that like I gave it a good effort, and uh, and that I, you know, the rest of it was just going to be like too painful. But for people who are looking to get into drawing, like it's a book that I definitely tell them to look at because it makes some of the technical things very, very like clear and obvious. And I think some artists really need that. Like they need to just see like, hey, you know what? Like if you want to be doing representational art, like there's just some amount of like drafting skills that you're going to need to have to execute. Unless you're going to be like a fine artist and you're doing like, you know, just wacky expressionist, whatever, abstract, whatever, you know, like, okay, fine, then you don't need it. But in the world of entertainment design, certainly you need it. And in the world of illustration, in most cases, you're going to need it. And a lot of people getting into illustration these days, they're getting into it so they can do like splash art for games or something. And I'll tell you, that's one where you really technical skill needs to be through the roof for that kind of stuff. This is a situation where I think we need to use the shadow on the inside to help us see this edge. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I guess we can do a little form indication there. Yeah, that seems good. Let's get this a little clearer here. Yeah, don't be afraid to use the lasso, guys. Like, it's seriously an awesome tool. I might have to up the opacity of my underdrawing for this bottom part because it's really, the lines are very spread out. And but yeah, let's get through. So I guess this means we're gonna see this ghost body up a little higher, right? Yeah, he's gonna come out there. It's like Casper body. It's doing that kind of shape. And we forgot to get this guy's Casper body going on. If you're watching and your name is Casper, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about Casper the Friendly Ghost. Okay, cool, cool. Yeah, let's get the rest of this tongue in here. And then the question becomes, do we when we get through this pass, the question will be, do we add directional lighting that hits the front at all, or do we keep it an ambient front? We go with just like a heavy rim light. I'm leaning in that direction, especially because the other day, actually, Tom, you were there for that, right? We were talking about that one guy who does like the ambient front and then he just sticks the rim light in the back, and I was like, yeah, that seems like a cool look. I should probably like play with that. I've done it before, but it's been a while, and I feel like it might be neat to explore. I mean, we can always add another light, right? Like we can always add stuff, but it'd be cool to just see, will this work without having any other directional lights hitting the front? Which is further reason we need to make sure that this pass reads clearly. Okay, let's get a little more shadow in these areas. Yeah, go for that. All right. Sounds good. Yeah, yeah. It's a nice little combo, right? Like you get that super subtle stuff from the front, and then that rim light in the back just really just pops, just makes everything feel really dynamic. Whereas if you put a directional light in the front and you do a rim light, I mean, that's cool too. Like it has a different feel. It's but I mean, we're going through the process of trying to make a really nice, good ambient pass here. So we have that ability. Again, I like to kind of give myself flexibility, so that way I can tweak this stuff and make some choices a little later, and I won't be stuck. Imagine if we were to be rendering this like alla prima, right? Like, oh my god, it'd be like no, we'd have to just see it all in our mind ahead of time, right? And there'd be no changing it. It's dangerous playing with fire. Is that his cranium? I'm just trying to make sure I'm okay. I think, yeah, we're gonna see his cranium there, and then his neck inserts there, and I guess we can show a little bit of like the mastoid muscle straining. I always forget. Do you see the mastoid more on the side that you're turning away from, right? Because it's stretching. So I guess maybe we wouldn't see it a lot there. You can definitely add a little bit of the collarbone there, though. Okay. Let's bring the underdrawing up and opacity a little bit so I can work on this stuff down here. Okay, so there we go. Let's get this big cylinder shape working first, his body shape. The other thing you can do too is you can turn on smoothing for some of these big sweeping shapes like this. So let's see, I could go like, let's go 65. Is that? Yeah, so that can be kind of a help, right? To just get, like, I was a piece I was working on a while back that had a lot of like squid tentacles and stuff like that. It was like a Cthulhu type thing, and I just wanted some of these nice curves in here, and so smoothing is really helpful for that. Now you don't want it to look mechanical, so I usually get in and I just sort of tweak and alter after the fact, but as an initial stroke, though, it's kind of nice that you can get stuff in there and not see so much like wobble or jitter in your stroke. Also, the fact too that basically everything I paint is not on a Cintiq or a screen display; it's on a tablet, so I don't have, like, there's a little loss of hand-eye coordination when you're not like looking at your hand. You're looking at the, I mean, it's very minor, but the smoothing can kind of help you with some of the stuff that can be a little challenging, not on a screen-based display. Probably going to want to lose this shadow here. It feels like it's cutting into the form too much, but that's okay. We can address that later. Also, too, you'll see that I'll try to make a mark and I'll undo it, try again, and I encourage that. Like, if something isn't working, just undo it and try it again. Like, don't make a bunch of hairy lines on top of each other to try and find the right mark. I mean, that just all of those lines on top of each other are gonna draw everyone's attention to the area where you're struggling, and you don't want them to look at it, right? So just undo it. Okay, so now smoothing's off again, so I can just work a little bit unencumbered by that drag. And then it can sometimes be worth it to go in and use the polygonal lasso. Just make sure that you don't end up creating any weird corners that are obvious, right? But like I want to just get in here and precisely select the inside of this coat edge so I can bring in shadow here. Right, like that's an easy way to do that. Do I prefer tablet over a screen display? You like a mix of both? I find that when I have access to both, I'm on the tablet 95% of the time, and then like 5% of the time I find just something that I think will just go faster on the screen. Typically it's something technical, like I'm doing a super clean line art, or I'm doing like masking or something. I'm like masking in shapes or something like that. But yeah, for the majority of the process, I just like the tablet. It's just the ergonomics I think are better. I just like being in a little bit more of a casual, relaxed position. And I like that my hand is not in the way of what I'm doing. So it just tends to work for me. But I also recognize that I learned on a non-screen based device. So it doesn't feel as weird to me to do it. But people who are new to that, and people coming from a traditional drawing background, it's sometimes it's like a really big hurdle to get over. And with screen-based displays being so prevalent now and so good, it's tough to sell people on the idea of using a tablet, a non-screen based one. But I'm sort of glad that I got used to it, because I do think it's ergonomically better. It's better for your back, yeah, for your neck. Like it's I can just work longer when I'm working on a tablet versus a screen. Also, a tablet doesn't get hot, which is nice. Not again, like that's stuff that I think is better these days than it used to be. I was an early adopter of some of the first screen-based devices, like the Cintiqs, the very first ones, and those things, man, you'd be sweating, dripping sweat onto your monitor. Those things were so hot. It was crazy. Did not enjoy that. So I think maybe that's also why I sort of tried to just get decent at using a non-screen based device, because I hated that experience. Yeah, I agree. I think it's not a huge difference. I think there's like just subtleties to it. I think you can get good at using either one. One thing I will say is there's a new one that Wacom put out, the Move Ink, and it has like what feels like more of like a iPad level of technology in it. It's super thin. I think it's like an OLED screen. I hear it doesn't get hot. It doesn't have like fans in it and all this stuff. And it's like, I want to see more of that. Like, make a nice, medium sized Cintiq using the moving technology. And that I think would get me a little excited about that. I might want to experiment with that again. But the one that I have, the Cintiq, is still gets kind of hot. The fans still spin up and are annoying, and like it's still big and heavy, and like you need a monitor arm to. I don't know. It's just like it feels like it's been many years since they first started doing Cintiqs, and they really haven't gotten that much better. They are better, but not enough for me to be totally sold and put my tablet away. Contending with this little belt here. Give it a little bit of shadow underneath. Yeah, I'm kind of looking for those intersections, right? Like here's where this uh, this pipe fold and this, I guess this is, yeah, it's pipe fold, half pipe fold. These two pipe folds and the belt intersect is right here, so it's like a great place for us to introduce a little bit more ambient shadow, and we can do it at the top here as well. I sort of think about these things like visual waypoints. Like if our eye, and this is how you should think about shadows in a lot of cases, is that you sort of want to like use shadows to help your eye flow through the image. Um, they're like torches along the path through the forest, right? It's good to think about things in various ways because everybody's gonna click with something different, and you're just sort of thinking about like you're searching for what is the way to think about it that clicks with me. Like what's the sort of um, mnemonic device that resonates with the way that I think about that idea. So there's a little bit of a split here. I was asking for it, designing this guy with a bunch of like squid tentacles at the bottom. Okay, let's turn the smoothing back on. I'm doing it in a couple strokes because I'm increasing the brush size a little bit as we go. And I'm just trying to be careful not to introduce an artificial transition. Like you can see it in some places, but I can try to use my smudge tool to kind of help. And you may be thinking, well, like now it looks like not perfect anymore. And it's like, that's kind of okay because this is not a machine. Now, if we were doing a machine, then I'd have to be really, really careful. But I also sort of like try to have a style to my art that doesn't require me to be like mechanically precise. Like I'm kind of okay with things being a little bit impressionistic, a little suggestive. Because I just don't enjoy like if I needed mechanical precision again, I would probably turn to like 3D. Okay, got that one. Let's take a look at this duplicated, see how that's looking. Okay. Yeah, I mean there's some big shadows that like we need to add in, but I'm working through all of the fiddly bits. Time consuming stuff. All right, cool. I think that's yeah, that's all the tentacles. Now let's adjust a little bit of this division here. And let's bring in more shadow here. I'll use lasso for this. Remember that when you're on the polygonal, or when you're on the free lasso, you can hold Alt and it'll switch to the polygonal lasso, which is nice. Am I on? Oh, I'm on smoothing. I was like, why isn't it responsive? Forgot I had smoothing turned on. There's one of those T intersections where the fold of the stomach meets the cloak and the body there, so it's a good little visual waypoint for the eye. I gotta remember to render that belt there. We got that one there still. Okay, let's just isolate that piece there. Do I want a little bit of rounding to this? Maybe we'll give it a little subtle rounding to the edge. I feel like that crisp edge feels a little artificial there. And a little visual waypoint there. Okay, let's render this belt here. And that's just like a buckle shape. Let's do that. Okay. Okay, let's maybe make that whole section darker there so it reads. Okay, cool. I think it's water break time. Stay hydrated. Let's see. Yeah, the tablet does take more time to get used to. They had a Wacom Companion years ago, which was basically a portable Cintiq with Windows on it. Apparently, it got really hot. I have one of those. Yeah, the Cintiq. I guess yeah. Is it called the Companion? The Cintiq. Yeah, I guess it is a Cintiq Companion or whatever. Yeah, I have one of those. It's actually I used it quite a bit. Mainly because when you're wanting to do stuff on the go, it's kind of a hassle to have a laptop and a tablet. Like it just requires a lot of physical space to have both of those. So when it's all in one thing, it helps. But you are definitely right in that that thing gets super hot. Now, what helps a little bit is that it's a small device, so it's generating heat, but it just has a small footprint. So versus like if you've got like a 20-inch Cintiq or something and you're face down in the Cintiq, you know that giant panel is just like radiating heat upward, whereas the Companion is like I think it's 13 inches or something. So it helps the fact that it's a smaller size overall. But yeah, I actually I like it, and that's another one where it'd be great if they could bring some of the moving technology to the new, whatever the new version of that companion might be. I'm much more inclined to use something like a Cintiq companion than something like an iPad because um, I'm too used to like Photoshop and hotkeys and just all the power that Photoshop has. I just can't stand like what is that thing called? Um, forget the name of it. The iPad painting app that everybody uses. Can't get into it, man. It's like I feel so slow using that thing. I'm like digging in the menus every time I want to do something. Procreate, I think that's what it's called. Yeah, Procreate. That's the one everybody uses. Yeah, Procreate. Yeah, I feel like a complete ogre inside that program. Like, it's wild. I think maybe it's just a generational thing. I'm gonna play around with some more holes in this cloak later. We don't need to get crazy with it at this point. Create a little edge there. Let's get some shading on this. Have I heard of the Wacom Inkling? You were going through school, you bought one of those device that clips onto any piece of paper and it records your pencil strokes. Oh, you know what? I have heard of that. I have heard. I never tried it though. It sounds interesting. It got discontinued. Yeah, yeah. Sometimes they discontinue things that I feel like could have been cool. Like one of them that I was really interested in was the 6D art pen. It had like a wedge stylus tip, like a marker, and it understood rotation, barrel rotation, and for me, like the tilt feature of the pen is interesting, but I would much rather it understand rotation. I feel like that would be way cooler, and that unfortunately, um, I didn't even know about it until it was discontinued already, and I had moved on to a tablet that like didn't support it anymore. And you can't. I mean, I think you can buy them for the older versions, but they just abandoned that. And I mean, I think. I mean, I understand why maybe it didn't sell well because it was expensive and it was very specific. But I think that the angle there is just integrate that into your normal stylus. Like it should just be a feature of what you normally offer. Like don't make it a separate thing. Like hasn't the tech evolved enough now to where we can just have it understand rotation as an option? I feel like that's not too crazy of an ask. Okay, cool, 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 cool. Oh, we got this built. Oh, and I didn't render the drippy bits. My apologies. Gotta make sure we get ambient occlusion shadows on our drippy bits. That's hilarious. I mean, we don't really need to, but yeah, we do it for sake of thoroughness. Oh yeah, there's a little bit of a drippy bit here. It's all a little bit crazy. I need to do the chains. Let's turn off our underdrawing and see if we like what's going on. Yeah, so the shadows look a little uneven, and that's actually fine. Like the next step of this is for me to go through and like double down on shadows in certain areas and introduce broader shadows in certain spots. We have to just get through this like base pass where we make sure that all the forms are represented somehow. All right, chains. I'm just going to do like a really simple shadow underneath the chains because I think later we're probably going to end up just using like a chain brush or something for this. So I don't want to like kill myself over rendering every chain's shadow. This is where, thinking ahead a little bit is good. And having done the process several times, you'll have a better idea of what you can do in a later stage. Like the first time you do this, or the first few times, you're not going to have that context, right? You're just going to think you need to define everything. But the more you do it, the more you'll know how to be efficient and avoid duplicating things that or doing things twice that could have just been done once later. All right. Let's get some more shadow in the inner edge of this cloak here. I'm going to have to be careful not to get the buckles in that. Maybe we'll just cut those out. Get a lot of shadow in that section there. We can give a little bit of like contour to the body up there. Let's go ahead and shade this whole section as a big cylinder. So the other thing worth mentioning, of course, is that you'll notice I'm thinking about things at different scales, right? Like the shapes at different levels of definition. What is the small shape? What is the big shape? What is the medium shape? And I'm trying to make sure that everything is reinforcing that big shape. Okay, let's give some better shading to the stomach here. One of the reasons I tend to do some of these bigger shadows a little later is because I can just sometimes see them better when I've got a few of the details blocked in. But generally, I'd recommend trying to do the bigger shapes first. And again, these are going to be like glowing bits down here, but I still want them to be like obeying the general light idea that we have going on. There likely should be a little bit more shadow underneath some of these parts. Okay, let's actually go for a little shadow there. I'm using a little trick there to imply a planar transition from this side of the box to this side of the box, right? It's very, very subtle. Okay, so let's see. Let's save this. Let's flip it so we can just see what the other side reveals to us. Okay, let's get more shadow from this collar onto the body. And then from this collar onto that collar. See, these are like really obvious things that should have been caught earlier, but like I had to flip it to see it. So I say definitely flip your stuff. You're just going to catch things that you were overlooking. And it's really just because it's funny. It's like it's very clear to me that it needs to be there. It's just like why didn't it happen? Well, it's just because I got laser focused on other areas, and flipping broke that laser focus. Right, it's like a tractor beam that's been turned off. Okay, so now we can kind of get in here. We can maybe be a little bit more crazy about the face rendering. I'm probably going to do a duplicate of the shadows at this point and just turn them down ever so slightly. Yeah, so let's do this. Let's turn this down. And what I'm looking for here is I'm looking for the darkest areas to not get burnt. I want the dark. I want to start to express a wider value range, but I don't want these to become like solid black or anything. So that's kind of what I'm dialing to. Like I'm trying to express that range. So if I go full, I feel like we're still pretty safe, but I want to give myself a little more breathing room. So I'm going to just back off a little bit, and I'm going to go right around there with it, and we'll just merge that down. Am I starting with color next time, or what's the plan for him? Yeah, so the plan is that we're going to put in our colors underneath all of our shadows. So, and I'll just, we got a few minutes left. I'll just kind of demo real quick as a preview what we're going to be seeing next time. But I like to always make sure that this shadow pass is really solid, like really dialed in before moving on, because I don't want to have to be worried about having to like tweak things in major ways, or that we have like readability problems or whatever. I mean, we solve design issues, we solve tangents in the line phase. This phase, you want to solve any like readability issues. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about here. Sorry for the jitter on the screen, but when I hold the space bar down, this version of Photoshop just likes to shake a little bit. So for whatever reason, good job, Photoshop. All right. So yeah, this is set to multiply the shadow layer, and then turn off our underdrawing. And yeah, I'll show you a preview of kind of what we got going on. So we're going to go, I think, for more of a flesh tone to his upper body. And then as we transition down, I think we'll get to more of like a ghostly sort of look. It's more spectral sort of vibe. So I don't know exactly what color it would be, but let's just say it's going to be, some kind of tone like that. That's definitely not right. What happened there? That's the color. And it's painting that. Why is that? It's probably something really obvious. Oh, it's because of that. Cool. Okay, so actually let's I have a hue saturation layer colorized. There we go. Link that. Now we're good. Okay, so let's see. Now if you watch this, and again, we'll be adding more details as we go to these. Like this face is not as gnarly as I want it to be, but just as a preview of what's going to be happening next time. So we, put our base color in, which establishes our local value as well. And then what's cool about this process is that, I'll just leave it there, you guys get an idea, is that we can inject all kinds of cool texture and color variation. So if I wanted to make some of the areas a little more warm, I can be adding that in, right? We can add warmth on the ears, right? Warmth in the nose area, around the lips, around the eyes, right? Right, you can see how we can get something robust right away, and then there's no reflections, right? We haven't implied any of the upper half tones yet. There's no specularity. We can add like this skin here. We would likely want to put some kind of a pattern on it. So not that. That's not what we would want. We would want something like, let's see, I don't know, where do I have like some impasto stuff here that I generally like to play with. So, ooh, that one's really nasty. Nope, not that one. Let's see. Do I have all of my... I don't know that I have all the ones that I like using in here. It looks like I'm missing some. Okay, well, anyway. Just as a preview of how we can get some texture in. So I'm going to dial it down a little bit here. And then raise opacity so we can get some color variation. We get some texture. This is the stuff that I don't really want to bother painting manually, right? Like we can inject that very easily. The bigger gradations of color and local value we're going to hand paint in. And then we come on top later and we introduce diffuse reflections. So let's see, round soft. So think about high points of the form, high points, and then, you know, we think about the color of the light in the scene. Like if it's a sphere, then we're going to paint spherically there. We're going to bring in specular reflections where they make sense. So if there's like, you know, areas that are like taut against bone, if there's areas that are wet, right, we can bring some of this stuff in. So you can start to see, like, we start to layer these effects and we start to get some cool results. I'm doing this very quick as just a way to show you guys what we're going to be doing next. But you can see how the layer that we spent a long time defining today fits into the grand scheme of things, right? So I think that's a really good place for us to end this stream. I think we've gotten to a really good spot. We can move on to the next phase of the render next time. And I think we actually get quite far next time. I think you'll see a lot of progress come together with this guy. It's been a fun one so far. I'm definitely enjoying it. I hope you guys are too. Let's see, do I have any other chat comments? Let's see. You like to airbrush some of the dark parts away when doing that, whenever I don't want to go any lower with opacity, but the darkest parts are still too dark and burnt, as you call it. Yeah, you have a lot of control, right? Like you can definitely dial stuff in. You can darken everything and then just like selectively pull back some of the spots there. Yeah, depending on the look that we're going for, I might even come back in and use pure black to really hit some of the shadows super hard. Again, it kind of just depends on the look we're going for. I haven't settled on the look yet. That's kind of the nice thing about the first one in the series, is that you're defining the style parameters. So whatever we define in here will be what we want to try to stick to for our future villain redesigns. Because what I'd like to do is create like a little ensemble image of all of our Ghostbusters villain redesigns, right? Put them all in the same scene with each other. It'd be really fun, right? And if we're going to do that, we need to be consistent. Kind of like if you remember the Masters of the Universe series, we did Skeletor first, and there was a lot of discovery in that, right? We were figuring out what kind of look we wanted, and then for the next three, we had to kind of stick with that. So a little bit of that going on here as well. But thanks for hanging out with me, everybody. It was a lot of fun, and we'll wrap it up here. And so definitely come back next week when we continue on this guy, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun adding some colors, okay? So good luck with everything, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.